as leaders, how do you differentiate sovereignty from the domination aspect of it?
One of the ways I think about sovereignty is I ask the question of my clients, if someone else does whatever they do, you have a reaction to it. You're not sovereign. You're at the cause of them.
Mm.
Whether it's your wife, your boss, your underlings, your son, your daughter, your parents, whatever it is. And it's no judgment. Like we all have some degree or another of that.
Yeah.
My ideal for clients is the more sovereign you are, you still might have a reaction to the person, the situation, their approach to life, whatever it happens to be. But then you have a moment of pause. So you don't have to act on that reaction. Like, oh, here I go again. I'm wanting to become aggressive. I'm wanting to withdraw. And the aggression could be the domination. Like, the way I shut this person down is I dominate them.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm sovereign, I don't have to do any of those things. I don't have to withdraw. I don't have to attack.
Mm-hmm.
I can just sit quietly myself. And it doesn't mean I have to be quiet. I'm quiet to myself. I notice all the things happening inside of me, but I'm not reactive to them. And then if I have an ethos, which I hope most people do, or a code of conduct, like in their own mind, like, okay, this is how I'm going to respond to this person or this situation, these people. And that drives one's behavior, not like I'm free and I have to act on whatever's happening inside of me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Root, Realign, and Rise podcast, where we explore what it means to root in truth, realign with what matters, and rise with responsibility in leadership and in life. Today's conversation is about sovereignty. My guest, Michael Ostrolenk, is a licensed marriage and family therapist, a master coach, and a resilience architect with more than 3 decades working at the intersection of clinical psychology, high performance leadership, and national security systems. He has served in senior roles with SEALFIT's Unbeatable Team Academy and working with former special operators, founders, and leaders in high consequence environments. Michael teaches what he calls the Sovereign Gentleman Framework. It's built on disciplined presence, relational mastery, and sovereign authority. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. And I love rising up with responsibility.
Well, thank you for being here. I think that the conversation that we have today is important. As we were discussing earlier, we talk so much on resilience on this show, but how do you be resilient? How do you handle things that happen in your life? There's stress, and for me, my body's what spoke to me, but for other people, it speaks to them in different ways. So I think it's important that we talk about this almost in a clinical psychology fashion. You've worked inside clinical psychology and national security ecosystems. What did those environments teach you about stress and the perception of?
So if it's okay with you, I'd love to kind of define how I see resilience.
Please.
Because I look at it as holistically or as comprehensively as possible. And I'm a human being, so there's limitations in my thinking. But, I look at the human individual, human system, and I look at it physically. What is it physically capable of handling? Look at it mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then I like to contextualize it in the relationships that humans are embedded in. It could be their families, could be their primary partners, could be their team they're operating in. So when I look at resilience, I can't just look at like one individual and an aspect of the individual. Like I said, I look at the whole person. I also look at the embedded environments and ecologies or social ecologies, what I call them, that they're part of. And it's important, and I at least believe so, important to look at all these different things. Because if there's any one area that seems less adaptable to life stresses, it can have a major effect. Like, it's like that, the saying when there's a butterfly that flaps its wings, in South America somewhere, it has an effect on weather somewhere in Africa. I think it might be reversed. I can't remember exactly what the story is. But, even micro shifts in any aspect of a system can have major, both positive, but also deleterious effects on the system. So I try to take as much of a systemic view as possible. So that's just kind of my underlying framework, if that's helpful for this conversation.
I think that's great. When you define resilience, how is it different than toughness? Let's start with that.
Yeah. So I had co-lead a men's group with a gentleman named J.C. Glick. He's a former Army Ranger, 11 combat tours. And we actually came up with a Resilience 2.0. I name him because I co-authored this idea with him, so I want to give him credit. And our basic 1.0 is like a David Goggins who runs 100 miles before breakfast, or Jocko Willenick, you lift weights at 4:30 in the morning, or do your thing. And we, for a lot of people, depending on the season of your life, it's great. Jump out of bed and do your thing and to build a physical capacity. Because the stronger you are more physically, and I don't even mean strength like you can lift heavy weights, but the stronger you are, just capacity of your physical body, the more you're capable of doing all kinds of things, including mental and emotional challenges.
Mhm.
Because your body is dysregulated and you feel like crap. It's kind of hard to do the things, whatever the things are. So it's great. Dial in your physiology, especially through hard physical training. But we take it to two more serious. That yes and that's kind of operating philosophy of mine is yes and yes and yes and.
Mhm.
It's like transcend and include. Transcend and include. How can we add on to make this more comprehensive and expansive? And the expansive part for me is with JC, with men, for instance, but this is with human beings. h- Are you capable of sitting in your own experience for longer periods of time without seeking distraction?
Mm.
And porn, drugs, alcohol, YouTube, Netflix, working, people like work extra hard, working out, like, these are all possible things people use to distract themselves from their own inner experience, their own
Mhm.
feelings, their own thoughts, their energetics of their physical body, whatever's going on from them, they don't like, they escape.
Mhm.
We humans seem to have a tendency to do that, and the technology supports it even more and more as we go on. So part of the way I think about resilience is, are you capable of just sitting for longer periods of time in your own experience? And what that shows you is if you, I basic claim is that there's wisdom in the body, there's wisdom in emotions, there's wisdom in the thoughts we have. Doesn't mean that they're 100% true or accurate or whatever the thing might be, but if there's wisdom there, and if we can start paying attention to it, we can have more alignment within our systems, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and operate more in a thriving mindset than a surviving mindset. If there's more alignment and integrity in the whole of the system, it doesn't always happen. There are days I don't feel like training because I'm tired. So there's not always alignment between my emotions and my thinking. Like, I'd rather stay in bed. But my discipline says, no, you got to go do the thing, whatever the thing is. It doesn't have to be physical training. But so my point is like part of resilience for me is just being capable of sitting in your experience for longer periods of time. And then I say interpersonally, are you able to sit in your partner's experiences for longer periods of time without getting defended, without trying to fix he or she, without doing the thing that you usually do to make yourself feel better because you don't like them feeling unregulated, dysregulated?
Mhm.
So it's not just like fall down 7 times, get up 8, which is great. Like, push yourself through and do the thing. That has its limitations because we're biological beings. I would say, the kind of the transpersonal or more expansive view of resilience is that, like, just sitting with and allowing to process through. And I just want to highlight one thing. Just because I encourage people to sit with and process through their feelings doesn't mean they have to express them.
Mm.
We're not free.
Mhm.
You don't have a tantrum, whatever the word is.
Temper tantrum, yeah.
Learning classes is like feel your feelings as fully as possible and then learn to skillfully, if appropriate for you, express them.
Mhm.
Just because you're angry doesn't mean you have to be road raging. Like you can manage yourself best on the situation and to the outcomes you want to seek in particular relationships. So I've talked a lot. Be quiet.
No, I think that's great that that internal governance is important. I think you're right. It's kinda like the seasons that we're growing. The longer we can sit in them, the more that we are expanding ourselves for that next session of growth, right?
Yes.
Let's talk about a little bit of the discipline presence that you talk. What does that look like behaviorally when you're under pressure? Does it look different?
Yeah, no, it definitely does because I shouldn't even say most people. Most people, I'd put it that way. Most people are pretty capable when things are okay. I mean, there are some people who just don't have any capacity, and when things are even okay, it's really hard for them. I understand that. But it's when the stress adds on, you get to see, I should say who they really are, but you see their own limitations
Mhm.
and how they manage themselves and how they manage the relationship. So I'll speak to couples because I work with couples a lot, and I'll be hard on men in this case. So if a man working with a partner, in a marriage, let's just say heterosexual marriage, and the man is triggered by his wife saying or doing the thing that always triggers him. Okay. He loses his ability to be present.
Mm.
He gets into his defensive mode, whatever it is, withdraw, collapse, aggression. Everyone's different and how they kind of do their thing.
Mhm.
And as long as it's not violence, I'm not talking about violence, but someone aggression could be like verbally aggressive or puffing themselves up or whatever they happen to do. And what happens is they lose presence for themselves.
Mm.
They get into like they just fall back into their old habit, their programming, and they lose contact with probably whole aspects of self, their breath, their muscles, the clarity of their own thinking, their observer. Like if you're talking about the witness in meditation, all of that goes to pot, and they go back to old habits.
Mm.
And which is horrible for them. It's also horrible for their partner because they can't be present for their partner. You know, they might be the most loving, caring person in the world, but when they get activated and they do their thing, it's like they don't show up lovingly,
Mm.
you know, because they do their thing.
Yeah.
They can't listen to their wife. They can't hear her words underneath her words. They can't necessarily hear the needs that she's asking for. And even if she's doing, you know, the unskilled job of asking for needs to be met, it doesn't matter. Like they just can't hear the thing. And they get into this tit for tat thing. Like, I'm going to prove you wrong. No, I'm going to prove you wrong. And they go back and forth. And to me, it's like disciplined presence is like, hey, can I manage my nervous system? Can I discipline myself? Disciple of something bigger than myself. The discipleship in this case is our relationship, something bigger. So can I subsume myself for that? Doesn't mean I give up on self. Doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. You know, a strong ego is a good thing.
Mhm.
But, you know, you're submitting yourself to something bigger than yourself, which is in this case, the marriage. And it could be religious in nature, but just say it secularly in the marriage.
Mhm.
Um, so you discipline yourself so you can do that, so you can be present to whatever's arising in you, in her, and then between the two of you. And the third piece of this is, I'll say, is you go from me to we.
Mm.
You discipline yourself into the marriage. You're going from me, like it's about me, and I got to protect myself against you because you're the whatever the bad person in this case in the moment. You don't really think
Yeah.
your spouse, but to like we, like oh wait, the space between us is an opportunity for us to grow as individuals and to us to grow as a partnership. But we have to come together to face it, and that to me is like talking about resilience. If you have that framework, which is also in the nervous system, it's not just a conceptual thing. You have a much more resilient relationship, but it requires a disciplined presence. You have to discipline yourself in your own nervous system, mind, body, spirit, so you can be present to yourself and the other person and the dynamics between the two.
You know, the word that keeps coming to my head really is almost like a sense of control that happens what happens in the control of your body and your mind really is what controls the authority of that relationship itself, whether that be in a personal, a marriage, you know, of that, or even as a leader, right? So how as leaders, how do you differentiate sovereignty from the domination aspect of it?
Yeah, and I just want to clarify something just to make sure I was clear too. You know, yeah, control is an interesting word, and I'll use it sometimes. I'll say management or self mastery, but I want to be clear. It's not like you're repressing your feelings, or I'm going to
Mm.
control myself against feeling something, because one or two things will happen. It'll come out sideways eventually,
Mm.
passive aggressive behavior, or it can come out as a chronic illness down the road. So I'm not suggesting like control it. It's just we're clear on that one.
I think you're speaking. I'm the one with the that happened with the, chronic illness with me. I tried to control everything.
Oh wow. Okay.
So, yeah, I feel that. What does that do, though, when it comes to, like, the domination, going back to that question?
Yeah. So one of the ways I think about sovereignty is I ask the question of my clients, if someone else does whatever they do and you have a reaction to it, you're not sovereign. You're at the cause of them.
Mm.
Whether it's your wife, your boss, your underlings, your son, your daughter, your parents, whatever it is. And it's no judgment. Like we all we all have some degree or another of that.
Yeah.
My ideal for clients is the more sovereign you are, you still might have a reaction to the person, the situation, their approach to life, whatever it happens to be. But then you have a moment of pause. So you don't have to act on that reaction. Like, oh, here I go again. I'm wanting to become aggressive. I'm wanting to withdraw. And the aggression could be the domination. Like, the way I shut this person down is I dominate them.
Mhm.
But if I'm sovereign, I don't have to do any of those things. I don't have to withdraw. I don't have to attack.
Mhm.
I can just sit quietly myself. And it doesn't mean I have to be quiet. I'm quiet to myself. I notice all the things happening inside of me, but I'm not reactive to them. And then if I have an ethos, which I hope most people do, or a code of conduct, like in their own mind, like, okay, this is how I'm going to respond to this person or this situation, these people. And that drives one's behavior, not like I'm 3 and I have to act out on whatever's happening inside of me.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Would you say that that dominance is what erodes emotional safety the fastest?
100%. But it's interesting. I'll just stick with a married couple. If the husband in this case, a wife can be aggressive too, but
Mhm.
whoever is aggressive, it does shut down the other person feeling safe to engage the conversation. Because understandably, like,
Yeah.
especially if it's a wife to a husband and the husband happens to be bigger, and there's a dynamic in our culture anyways that would indicate to me that women doesn't indicate to me. Women have shared with me that there's just a general fear of some men in our culture who act certain ways and, makes you feel uncomfortable. So that's our kind of embedded in our culture, not just the individual psychology.
Yeah.
But the withdrawal can do the same thing. Like I work with couples and just say the husband, his MO is not to be aggressive, which can shut the wife down, but he withdraws.
Mhm.
Like I jokingly say he takes his toys and goes home. Well, that makes her feel just as unsafe. I mean, not necessarily physically. There's no like immediate sympathetic activated state, but it could be a sympathetic activated state, not for a physical threat, but a more of an emotional mental threat because of abandonment issues. For instance, like he shuts down. Oh, he doesn't care for me. Doesn't love me. Doesn't dot dot whatever the kind of conversation
Yeah.
unconsciously or consciously goes through the person's head. Both can be threatening to the individual.
I think that pre-programming that we go through really does affect and that nervous system regulation influences the trust that we have in those relationships and in those teams. When someone is performing competence, how can you tell?
When someone's performing competence.
Yeah, you mentioned that I think on your profile, and I'm curious a little bit what that looks like.
Oh, performative. Okay, okay, okay. So it's something you could see over time if someone steps into a situation and they're more performative, meaning they're acting as if they're playing a role as opposed to that's who they generally are. You'll see kinks in the armor over time because it's like you tell a lie, then you got to remember your lie. Well, if you're playing a role repeatedly, it's not who you are. You got to continually remember who that is. And if you start paying attention to people in your environment, friends, family members, coworkers, they'll see cracks in it because they can't always remember and play that same role exactly as they've learned to do. And it's not a judgment. We all of us human beings to some degree or another are performative. We learned early in childhood, if you do this thing, you don't get beaten. Or if you do this thing, you get the cookie or, whatever the thing you do to make your parents or your mom or your dad or caregiver, whoever it is, your coach or teacher happy. I'm going to do that because I prefer that to a negative reaction from that particular person. So we learn to perform to get the thing, to get the goodie.
Mm.
So there's no judgment on anyone who does it. We all do it. My basic thing is like, let's if we call it a mask, it's a mask we wear so we can survive in the world. You don't want to get rid of it completely all at once because it's a survival mechanism
Mhm.
that you can slowly deconstruct it, figure out who you are behind that mask, and learn to engage that part of yourselves and then express that part of yourselves more fully,
Mhm.
which is authenticity, really.
Yeah. What are I had this question and even before we even started this, but I'm curious what your answer is what are the 3 capacities that are required for mature leaderships and relationships today that in your frame of mind or reference?
Yeah. So self awareness,
Mhm.
like it's so important because so many people are not aware. There might be aspects of self they might be aware, but I would say a lot of people are not aware of the depths of who they are and how they come across. And I'll give you, for instance, one of the things I work with couples is like start paying attention to your tone and your volume and the words that you use because I will hear a spouse say, "Yeah, but I'm asking her this question." Well, actually, I've heard a woman say this to me about her husband. I'm asking him this question, and I'm really curious. And he's like, "You hear her tone? She's not asking a question. She's a
Mm.
effing lawyer trying to, prove that I'm wrong."
Interrogating.
Yeah, she's interrogating me, and like, reading the witness. And I'm like, okay. So in that case, and all people do it. I
Yeah.
just give
Yeah, just
this
explain.
example. Like when she starts paying attention to her tone, her volume, and the words she used, she's like, wow, like I thought my intent was good,
Mm.
my delivery, and there's some a little bit underneath the intent too, is like, she does want to prove him wrong and guide him in a certain direction. She acknowledges that. And that changes the dynamic when you start becoming aware of that in that case. Or facial expressions. You say one in your face and body say another. Like, okay, I don't who do I believe? You know, so self-awareness, I would say, is one thing.
Okay.
A second thing is other awareness. I teach my clients whole person active listening.
Mm.
Listen with your ears,
Mm-hmm.
what they say, how they say it, tone, volume, all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Listen with your eyes, like what do you actually see? Facial expressions. You can see temperature shifts. You can see physical movement away or towards. I mean, you can see a lot in people's physicality.
Yeah.
Listen with your heart. Listen with your gut, like
Mhm.
gut intuition, especially for safety reasons. Like, pay attention to your environment. And your gut says, "Don't go down that path. Don't go down
Yeah.
the path." And this might be sexist, but I find a lot of women seem to have more access to their intuition. I don't know if that's exactly true, but they're in their gut.
Yeah, they
Uh,
do talk about that a lot.
okay. I mean, that's my experience.
Yeah.
I don't have any research to back that up, but it just seems like women seem to be more intuitive that way than not. And yet our culture seems to do its best to suppress that.
Mm.
So like, okay, use your gut to be aware of this other human being.
Mhm.
And then I would say transrational insight or intuition kind of drops down into the head, is also really important too. And I always tell people, like, when you're taking a decision, use your rational brain, pros and cons,
Mhm.
use your gut, use your heart, use your spiritual insight or transrational insight, whatever it happens to be, put it all together and you can make a better decision, hopefully a better decision for yourself than if you deny parts of self in assessing other people.
Mhm.
So other awareness is helpful. And then I'll say the third thing is self-transcendence.
Mm.
We seem to, as human beings, have proclivity to be conservative. And I don't mean politically. This is not a political comment. But in terms of protecting our own energy, we like habits. We do the same thing. Even if from the outside looking in, like, why would that person do that? Like, why would they find themselves in the same relationship over and over and over? Well, that's because they're used to. They don't like novelty, even though it doesn't seem like a healthy relationship, or those unhealthy habits that they do. That's just what they're used to, and it's so much easier to do what we used to because it saves energy. You don't have to give it a lot of thought and put a lot of energy into it than seeking novelty. And although there are some people who just naturally seem to seek novelty and growth and stuff, but so self transcendence. If you recognize our tendency to conserve energy and to get locked into certain identities, that's just who I am. That's just who she is,
Mhm.
and realize that that's not true. That's true because we believe it to be true and we act as if it is true. But if we can take steps to transcend those limitations and recognize that how we've identified ourselves, the stories we tell about ourselves, who we think we are, is like just a small part of who we're really capable of being.
Mm.
Really. So, transcend self, transcend the situation, look for new possibilities for growth and development.
That's so interesting because, I think you're right. I think we do this thing where we almost pre-program ourselves to thinking that this is what we know best, and yet we don't push past some of those limitations, and so our nervous system doesn't know how to handle that stress or that stretch of resilience. It doesn't know what that newness is. Kind of going back a little bit to men versus women. This is going to be a kind of controversial question, but I'm so curious to your question because you deal with both men and women. And you're right. I think that women, we rely on our gut. We're very emotional beings as women. And maybe not all typically. So don't get me wrong. This isn't a full, but men tend to, is it that uh, they have more courage or and stretch to that resilience, or what would you say that real difference is? I'm so curious what your answer is to that.
Well, I would use an evolutionary psychology lens.
Mhm.
And I like systems, I like maps, I like models, so, hold this lightly because it's just one way of thinking about
Yeah.
things. But I think if you look at human beings, men and women evolved to play different roles, and I don't mean like in the last 30 years in women's rights or last
Yeah.
6 years in women's rights, but like tens of thousands of years.
Mhm.
And women, until recently took care of babies. They had babies, they took care of the family.
Yeah.
And they did foraging, and that required a different access of the brain and capacities than maybe a man who had to go out hunting.
Mm.
And you eventually had agriculture. But even agriculture You saw the limitations in women because you don't want women pushing plows because they are pregnant a lot of the time because there's no birth control and they can lose babies. So even when you switch from hunting, gathering to agriculture, there's still roles, natural roles that women played, and there's natural roles that men played. Different in industrialization, different in post-industrial information age. That's changing these dynamics. But over tens of thousands of years, I think men are more aimed at going after the thing because they have to go hunting, and women were more like localized and looking around for the safety of their children, and then plant plants and picking up
Right.
those kind of things. So just activated different parts of the brain, and I think a lot of that still remains in us. Not like we have choice, of course, and our culture of influences how we do things, and technology influences how we do things. But I would say, tens of thousands of years of doing the other thing still is ingrained in us to a certain degree.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. For someone who feels externally successful, because I get a lot of leaders who are listening to this and looking for resilience as they grow in that fashion, but yet they're still feeling internally strained. I mean, we're all trying to lead our lives in certain ways. Where do we start?
So with all my clients, and this is going to sound weird, especially with my couples, because I get pushback from my couples with first session. They're like, why are we doing this? My program is divided into 4 aspects: physiological, psychological, social, and environmental. And then one of the first things we tackle is physiological, meaning how are you sleeping or not? How are you eating, exercise? And I make a distinction between exercise, fitness, and movement practices, stress management, and circadian biology, the 24-hour day-night cycles. And I work with clients. Some of them are like, oh my God, I'm so effed up and we got to dial all this stuff in. Like, I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, I'm not exercising, all this stuff. And then others are like more elite athletic types, high performers, and they dial most of that stuff in. They're biohackers who are doing all the things, and it's more subtle adjustments. Cool. Awesome. But I would say anyone coming in, first thing, sleep. Like, people ask me, so what are the 2 big things you recommend? I said, be nice to other people and get good sleep. Like, let's start there.
Yeah. Great. I might go take a nap after this. I said, after that, I think I might go take a nap after this then.
I like it.
I love it. If that is the thing that we were to leave with today, would that be the one thing that you would suggest for others to start with if they wanted to become more resilient? What's the one thing they could start with today as they leave this conversation?
Definitely sleep. Like that, 2 to 3 or 4 nights of poor sleep, you already have a cognitive decline, increased incidence for diabetes. I mean, and we're not talking about a couple of days. Most human beings on this planet Earth, especially here in the United States, they're weeks or months or years of poor sleeping habits.
Yeah.
So dial in your sleep. But let me just for a moment just share what that actually might look like. Try to get to, this is not possible for everyone, but try to get to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time, get a good sleep hygiene, meaning like turn your devices off at least an hour before you get into the bed. You can have blackout blinds so you have no artificial light coming to your room, eye shades so there's no artificial light from your room, just in case your partner is reading or lights are on, whatever it happens to be. There are certain supplements that people will take to calm down the nervous system, which is awesome. You can look into that as well. Meditation practices, binaural beats, breath practices to calm down the nervous system. So get a good, what I call PM ritual together that really helps you dial in your physiology and your psychology in preparation for sleep. And what I tell my clients is like, as excited or as interesting as the waking consciousness is day, like you do all this prep work to get ready to take on the day.
Yeah.
I would do the same thing for dream time because dreams are really interesting, but also like so much health and healing and recovery take place if you sleep well. And if you go in with that mindset, like I really want to recover well so I could be prepped for the next day, different mindset than oh God, more sleep. I got to sleep. And then I got to get up and do the thing.
Yeah.
Be intentional and mindful at all times of your day, but especially at nighttime.
I think that's so helpful. That is, I will be honest with you, for me at least, that is the one area that I'm still at 47 years old, still working on is how to be better at shifting into that second mode of our life. Because really, we spend how much time living awake, but then how much time do we spend sleeping? And it really does make that difference. So thank you so much for all of this information. I think that I know it didn't just help me. I'm sure that there's somebody else out there that's really probably needing this as well. So, uh, where is the places that if they wanted to reach out, continue to follow you, and maybe seek some help, where can they find you?
Sure. Thank you for that. Thanks for the question. So my website's Michael D as in David, the initial, Ostrolenk.com. I'm on, what am I on? I'm on Substack, Michael Ostrolenk. I'm on Instagram, M Ostrolenk. I'm on Twitter, M Ostrolenk. You can find me on LinkedIn as well, Michael D. Ostrolenk.
And we'll have it also in the description of the episode as well. So thank you so much for being here. Before we wrap, I like to remind everybody that you don't have to be whole to lead. Leadership does not begin once everything is resolved. It begins when you root right here in the now with your truth and you realign with what matters, choosing to rise with that responsibility right where you are. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.